Oh, hey, Ghoulash here, still for whatever reason involuntarily the head counselor of Camp October in frickin' November. After Halloween, my master, Dr. Wolfula, completely disappeared and has pretty much abandoned me and the remaining surviving campers.
Okay, what's the riddle?
Doc was really embarrassed for not getting the riddle in Halloween Night about an object in a man's pants having a hole in its head and stiff as a lance, technically being a key.
An object lies within a man's pants with a hole in its head and is stiff as a lance.
It's a key.
In Doc's defense, it was the only thing in the movie that made any sense, and he was probably predisposed to thinking it was nonsense, and he was also probably still thinking of the riddle in terms of referring to a dick. The head you put into a hole are on two different sides of a key and a dick after all, so he probably thought of the head as the part you put into a hole, which isn't the case with a key. Anyway, Doc is really sorry for letting you guys down with what will possibly be his last video, and I hope he comes back soon to finally evacuate us, because I'm genuinely really fucking scared, especially after seeing so many kids die here last month. This video is essentially a plea for help from anybody watching it, but since I'm here, I might as well review another Simpsons Halloween episode, and as Stained very often said, it's been quite some time.
This is legal, right?
Yeah, sure, whatever.
I'll be covering Treehouse of Horror 9, the 4th episode of The Simpsons' 10th season, aired on October 25th, 1998.
Wow, if your fly weren't open, you look just like Roger Moore.
Like I said previously, The Simpsons began to decline around Season 9, but it technically started to decline with Season 8. The controversial, gimmicky episode, The Principal and the Pauper, was a Season 8 episode holdover that aired in Season 9.
I'm an imposter. That man is the real Seymour Skinner.
And the show further declined in Season 10. Now, a lot of hardcore Simpsons fans take the show declining the wrong way. The decline of The Simpsons doesn't mean it just suddenly sucked or that it's even bad now. It just means the show got worse and rarely reached the heights it did in its prime. For years, the show remained good as it declined. It's just that The Simpsons started to increasingly resort to some cheap gimmicks out of desperation to generate stories.
But I'm also here to talk about Sprint. You stand to save up to 17 cents a month over the more dependable providers.
Celebrity guests would be a much more frequent occurrence, and they'd often just play themselves. The worst offender in Season 10 being When You Dish Upon a Star, which did not age well with the plot focused entirely on Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger becoming friends with Homer.
He screwed up, but he deserves another chance.
Yeah, everyone makes mistakes.
Along with Ron Howard for some reason.
Guess it's up to me.
Or you have Viva Ned Flanders, where it's suddenly revealed that Ned is 60 years old.
Well, I'm 60.
And he goes through a midlife crisis, which has lasting consequences, but Ned's age is never mentioned again.
Give me a white wine spritzer.
There's an episode in Season 10 that's just parodies of Bible stories, and Season 10 also starts the trend of episodes where the Simpsons just go to another country, and the story is just a series of gags parodying the country.
Isn't this that cartoon that causes seizures?
There are some fun episodes in The Simpsons' 10th season, and even the bad episodes are funny, but the show was starting to become a wacky shell of its former self. But even as things started to get worse, the Halloween specials stayed reliable.
You are so dead.
One notable thing about Treehouse of Horror 9 is that it was the last episode of The Simpsons that David X. Cohen wrote for 20 years. David X. Cohen developed Futurama with Matt Groening, which aired just a few months after Treehouse of Horror 9. So Cohen used his quote-unquote spooky credit for the episode to just straight up plug Futurama's premiere. A lot of classic Simpsons writers began to leave in greater numbers around this time to create or work on other shows, which might have contributed to The Simpsons' decline. And speaking of decline, Treehouse of Horror 9 is admittedly a good example of it as far as having celebrity guest stars just for the sake of having celebrity guest stars, featuring 5 celebrity guests in this one Halloween episode by itself.
Hi, I'm Ed McMahon.
But one of the guests is at least appropriate and should have had a bigger role. This Halloween episode features a condensed horror recreation of the typical Simpsons intro, which features the deaths of Bart, Lisa, and Homer. Wait a second, Marge could see Homer. She did that on purpose. In place of the Simpsons family, the couch gag features Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees in one of their first appearances on screen together 5 years before the release of Freddy vs. Jason.
I don't get it. They should be here by now.
What are you gonna do?
Freddy's cameo in this episode is actually voiced by Robert Englund, which kind of surprises me because it doesn't really sound like Englund's usual voice for Freddy.
We'll see, bitch.
This isn't actually Freddy's and Jason's first appearance on The Simpsons, though. They previously cameoed with a bunch of other horror icons in Treehouse of Horror 5's parody of The Shining.
Oh, yeah, tame it, baby.
The first segment of Treehouse of Horror 9 is Hell Toupee, which is a parody of an Amazing Stories episode also called Hell Toupee. They didn't even bother to come up with another clever title like they usually do. They probably saw the original pun title and said, that's good enough. And I'm surprised they didn't get sued for giving their parody the exact same title as the thing they're parodying. In a subversion of his usual robbery of the Quickie Mart, with Apu shot in the process, Snake just buys a comb at the Quickie Mart. The issue is that Snake smokes in a no-smoking zone, which results in Snake's swift arrest by Chief Wiggum, who instantly gives Snake the death penalty when Snake received a slap on the wrist in the past for crimes that actually warrant the death penalty.
You torched that orphanage, then you blew up that bus full of nuns.
That was self-defense.
And Snake declares revenge against the witnesses Moe, Apu, and even Bart.
You are so dead, little dude.
Snake's execution is aired live on TV, which is something The Simpsons hasn't quite predicted yet, but we're getting there.
World's deadliest execution.
This is where the first pointless celebrity cameo comes into play, with the late Ed McMahon hosting Snake's execution. McMahon's role in the episode isn't funny or memorable, it just feels like he's in the episode just to be in it, which became typical for celebrity guests on The Simpsons. After Snake fries in the electric chair, Homer gets a transplant of Snake's hair by the always professional Dr. Nick. Snake's hair takes over Homer's personality, though, and causes Homer to go out for revenge against the witnesses that got Snake killed. Why Snake didn't go after Bart first, the most convenient of the witnesses to kill? Well, whenever you notice something like that, a wizard did it.
Later, chickie pie.
Hell Toupee might be one of The Simpsons' closest brushes with doing a slasher movie parody with ironic kills, with Snake drowning Apu in the squishy machine and pulling Moe's heart out with a corkscrew. Moe's death isn't even a sight gag like Apu's, it's just a brutal murder you'd see in a Friday the 13th movie, but it was supposed to be bloodier, but the producers told the animators to tone it down. Still, even though Treehouse of Horror episodes are non-canon, it's pretty shocking to see the characters getting brutally murdered in them.
How long are we gonna let me keep drinking this thing?
One of my favorite gags in this episode might be Moe asking Apu if he has a very specific cereal.
Hey, Pooh, you got a breakfast cereal for people with syphilis?
And then we see Moe eating it in the next scene. Hell Toupee ultimately culminates in a confrontation between Bart and the snake-possessed Homer. What is this, Jason Goes to Hell the final Friday? And the animators try their best to make this confrontation funny with sight gags, but it really just feels like a rehash of Sideshow Bob trying to kill Bart in a canon episode of the show. It is pretty funny seeing Snake's hair come to life independently like some kind of wig version of Child's Play and watching the cops conveniently arrive to gun a hairpiece down with no questions asked. But the story does just sort of end with the all the characters laugh thing cartoons do when they can't think of a satisfying ending.
Now that's what I call a bad hair day.
Hell Toupee has some pretty memorable moments, but watching somebody else trying to kill Bart, even Hair, ends up feeling a little too familiar when it's been done funnier with Kelsey Grammer. I give Hell Toupee 3.5 treehouses out of 5. The episode's second segment, The Terror of Tiny Toon, a title that's a play on the Terror of Tiny Town, and I guess Tiny Toon Adventures, is one of the most memorable Treehouse of Horror segments, though it admittedly isn't very spooky. Krusty the Clown is airing a particularly brutal Itchy and Scratchy short for Halloween, but Marge forbids Bart and Lisa from seeing it, and takes the batteries out of the TV remote while she takes Maggie out trick-or-treating. Yeah, for some reason, not having the remote makes the TV completely inoperable.
Mama took those batteries.
So the kids use a plutonium isotope Homer brought home from work as a battery for the remote, which turns it into the remote from that one Adam Sandler movie I can't remember the title of, and with a click, it's able to teleport the kids into the Itchy and Scratchy episode, which isn't so great because Itchy and Scratchy don't take kindly to having an audience for their mayhem.
Hey, they're laughing at your pain.
Terror of Tiny Toon is a fun concept that finally has the Simpsons crossover with the characters from their show within a show, Itchy and Scratchy. The closest that this could happen within the show's reality is the killer robots in the Westworld parody episode Itchy and Scratchy Land, which actually itself feels like a long Treehouse of Horror segment that's actually canon.
Nobody ruins my family vacation but me and maybe the boy.
It's easy to forget that Itchy and Scratchy are fictional cartoon characters within The Simpsons because it has such a prominent role in what is also a cartoon, and it can be difficult to distinguish any difference from the real world of The Simpsons and a cartoon within it. This segment also gives a rare cameo to Poochie, even though they said Poochie died on the way back to his home planet and would never ever be seen again.
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
Well, that was a fucking lie. The segment is pretty fun as a parody of the movie Stay Tuned, but it also reminds me of the Twilight Zone movie segment where we see the voice of Bart Simpson get fucking murdered by cartoon characters. Still one of the most terrifying sequences ever committed to film.
That's all.
The actual Simpsons segment, though, isn't all that spooky, feeling more like a protracted Itchy and Scratchy short. But what is notable during the segment's chase sequence is that, while Homer is changing channels, Bart and Lisa end up crashing an episode of Regis and Kathy Lee, one of very few live-action sequences in The Simpsons, and it's kinda jarring, but the celebrity cameo this time around is funny just because of how out of nowhere it is.
I'm going home. Dom DeLuise can interview himself.
The one actually spooky moment in this segment is where Itchy and Scratchy launch piranhas at Bart that eat his entire body, leaving Bart as a skeleton, which looks really fucking creepy, probably because of how uncannily detailed the skeleton is, but it has the proportions of Bart Simpson.
Lisa, look out! A skeleton!
Ultimately, this segment has a somewhat happy ending where Itchy and Scratchy are relegated to the role of pets, and we learn that Scratchy has balls that you just can't see.
That means you'll have to be neutered.
That's just nuts. The Terror of Tiny Toon is a fun, memorable Treehouse of Horror segment, but it's not really that spooky or funny. It's just an entertaining cartoon premise. I give The Terror of Tiny Toon 4 treehouses out of 5.
Homer, you're not going as a hobo again.
Going where?
The final segment of the episode is easily the worst of the episode, and it might even be the worst segment I've discussed so far in these videos. Starship Poopers. Despite the title, it's thankfully not a scatological parody of Starship Troopers.
Here comes the flying saucer.
Maggie starts to show some bizarre changes, getting her first baby tooth while also losing her baby legs.
Maggie lost her baby legs.
It's revealed after Maggie sends a signal into space that her real father is Kang of Kang and Kodos fame, the aliens that always appear in Treehouse of Horror episodes, and they get another segment dedicated to them for once. Too bad this segment isn't all that great.
And we've come to see my daughter.
One of the only funny scenes in the segment is when it flashes back to Marge getting abducted with a lasso. My favorite of the abduction site gags. They can fly across the galaxy, but they can't beam people up into their ship. And it's also funny to see Kang try to seduce Marge in typical one-night stand settings, but thankfully Marge's sexual assault by an alien isn't invasive. After the flashback, the segment devolves into a parody of Jerry Springer, with Jerry Springer actually guest starring, of course.
Ladies and gentlemen, meet Kang.
And it's just such a one-note parody of Jerry Springer you've seen in everything else. It feels like they were asked to put Jerry Springer somewhere in the show, and they just shoehorned him into this Halloween episode. It feels like a joke on Futurama that would only go for 15 seconds that goes on for 8 minutes in this episode.
What the?
The only highlight of the Jerry Springer scene is when Kang actually murders the late Jerry Springer on TV. There's just something funny about how Jerry Springer quickly suffocates.
Jerry Springer didn't solve our conflict.
And now he's dead.
The segment ends with Kang and Kodos threatening to kill all of the USA's politicians.
Oh, you couldn't destroy every politician.
Just watch us.
Which they don't realize is a good thing. Politics.
Don't forget Ken Starr.
Starship Poopers is true to its name. It's fucking shit. A great example of Simpsons' decline with lazy, topical, gimmicky writing with a guest star. The only thing funny about it is how bizarre it is. I give Starship Poopers 2 treehouses out of 5.
Holy flirking schnit!
Overall, Treehouse of Horror 9 is just an average Halloween special. It suffers a bit from what a lot of future Treehouse of Horrors end up doing. Not being very spooky and just feeling like non-canon parodies of things that aren't all that scary. The first 2 segments are pretty good and fun though. They're just let down by a particularly weak final segment. I give Treehouse of Horror 9 overall 3 treehouses out of 5.
What are you gonna do?
Before I go, I want to promote my own channel, The Ghoulash, which is back with some new videos covering the Beetlejuice franchise.
There's a Beetlejuice in this movie?
That's my gag! Ugh. Doc and I recently reviewed Beetlejuice, the long-awaited sequel, and I've recorded a review of the animated spin-off series that will go up as soon as I get the fuck out of these woods. Link to the Beetlejuice videos in the description or by clicking this card. Subscribe to the Ghoulash channel today. I'd really appreciate it. It'd, seriously help me out. Speaking of which, somebody please help us! Help us! Hey Ghoulash, I'm back from crying. What did I miss? Oh, thank God. Doc, we gotta get out of here right now! Oh, that's definitely not gonna happen. This video is made possible through the pledges of my Patreon supporters, and I'd like to give a very special thanks to the kind folks pledged to my shoutouts tier. All of the support on Patreon means a lot to me, and it helps my dark influence continue to grow. If you like this video, like it, and if you loved it, click the subscribe and bell buttons for more vids. Be sure to also keep in touch by following me on social media at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Dr. Wolfula. While I still have your attention, consider pledging to my Patreon to support the channel and get bonus content like previews, VIP Discord server access, private movie night streams, and credits in videos. Consider pledging at patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula. Also, check out official Dr. Wolfula t-shirts and other merch on tpublic.com/user/Dr. Wolfula. Thanks for watching. See you all next time. Dr. Wolfula signing out.